I've had a request to demonstrate some of the cornets that are available in libraries these days. And since I have 3 cornets, I thought I would just go through them and show what they are capable of. I've chosen 3 cornets that have full dynamic control through a CC, so you can control these either using Aftertouch for a Rolly or something like that, or you can use CC11 or even a breath controller to control the dynamics. There of course are other cornets available. East West have cornets in their play libraries, for instance, but they don't respond very well to CCs. They're more of a velocity instrument. So for the sake of this walkthrough, we're going to be using 3 cornets. The first cornet is the Cornet version 3, which is part of the trumpet version 3 from Samplemodeling, and that's a contact library, and you can see that on the screen at the moment. I've loaded the default Cornet 3, and I've not changed any of the CC controls, so it's being controlled using CC11, and Vibrato is added using CC1, so the usual mod lever. The second instrument, which you can now see on your screen, is the Vienna Instruments Cornet. This is the Cornet Complete, and I've loaded up the performance legato articulation of this patch, and the dynamics are controlled with CC11 as well. And finally, we've got the WIVI Cornet number 1. I've placed the cornet in the symphony hall, as you can see, about 20 or 30 feet from the audience, and again assigned the vibrato to CC1, and I've assigned the dynamics to CC11. So hopefully the controls are all pretty much the same. The balance of level is slightly different on each instrument, simply because of the way that the ambience in vibrato is calculated, but those are the 3 instruments. For the sake of equality, I've also put the trumpet version 3 through the T-Verb plugin, which is a reverberation kind of algorithm plugin, which gives a nice room ambience. So, because the trumpet version 3, the Samplemodeling trumpet, is incredibly dry, so I've applied a little bit of ambience to that. The Vienna Instruments is going through its normal algorithmic reverb, and as I said, the WIVI is going through the symphony hall to give a similar kind of sound. So what do these different instruments sound like? Well, I've got them all loaded up into Cubase, and I've got my controller in front of me, and so I'm just going to go through the basics of what instrument is capable of. So the cornet from Samplemodeling is a very dynamic instrument. It is, I think, designed better for the jazz and pop. It does do very well as a classical cornet, but it has a very bright tone to it, and I'll demonstrate how bright that is. So I'm going to do a sweep from CC11 0 up to 127, and then play a few notes. What the cornet also has is vibrato from CC1. So at the moment it has no vibrato, and I can bring it in. Which is really nice. You can just add a little bit of vibrato with the mod lever should you need it. You'll also notice that at very low velocities it does a kind of portamento glide from note to note. Again, this is really of the jazz origins, not of classical origins. So as long as you hit your keys higher than velocity in the mid-20s, it'll do a fairly nice legato transition. Hit it nice and slowly though. You'll get that slurred kind of portamento legato. So that's the cornet from the Samplemodeling. And now on to the cornet from Vienna Instruments. It's worth noting that the cornet from Vienna Instruments already has vibrato, It's sampled with vibrato, and on the version I have, I'm unable to turn off that vibrato. So mod lever, in this case, simply controls the articulation because that's the way that it's set up. So leaving it on the performance legato, you can see CC11 moves the velocity crossfader from 0 up to 127, and I can play a little melody on this one, again doing a slide through all of the dynamics. So it's a very nice sound. It's not quite as bright as the sample modeling cornet, but has a lovely kind of American military sound. I mean, it does sound beautiful. You can imagine that being in a soundtrack to some American military film. It just kind of fits really well. It's much less jazzy, far more of a classical tone, as you'd expect from the Vienna Instruments libraries. We're going to do a side-by-side comparison in a minute using the same melody line played on the same keyboard with the same controls, so you'll be able to listen to those in a second. And finally, we've got the WIVI Orchestra. The WIVI orchestras are very different to the other two libraries in that it is pure synthesis. The sample modeling's trumpet is partly resampled synthesis and samples. The Vienna Instruments is pure samples, whereas the Wallander WIVI instrument is using synthesis alone. So the trumpet has a slightly different sound. The cornet does sound slightly more synthetic, but you've still got the same performance controls. The dynamics are controlled using CC11, and the vibrato is added using CC1. So you could hear the vibrato coming in there. It is a slightly synthetic vibrato. And although it does have the pitch and the amplitude modulation in there, it does sound a little bit synthetic compared to the slightly more natural vibrato of the sample modeling trumpet. And of course the Vienna Instruments trumpet is real vibrato because it's been played and sampled in that way. So those are the three trumpets in their raw form. I'm just going to close those three windows down. And what I've done is I've prepared two little pieces, one you'll recognize and one I've just made up, to try and play these instruments in context. So I'm going to start by just playing the sample modeling instrument, and you can see here it's got some dynamic controls using CC11. And in the case of the sample modeling instrument and the WIVI instrument, I've also applied some vibrato where appropriate, whereas of course the Vienna Instruments, the vibrato is already within the sample, so you can't control that. So starting with the sample modeling. So that was the sample modeling. Now we'll move on to the Vienna Instruments. And then we'll move on to the WIVI Orchestra. So I'm not going to really comment on my opinion on these instruments. I'll let you make up your own mind. But those are the same three melodies played using the same three cornets. I'm then going to move on to something a little bit more dynamic that uses more of the full dynamic range of the instrument, and again starting with the sample modeling and then moving on through the Vienna and then the WIVI. And now the Vienna instruments. And finally, the WIVI cornet. And there you have it, the three cornets from Sample Modeling, Vienna Instruments and Wiggio Orchestra put into a musical context to let you make up your mind which one you think works best.